It's been 2.5 years since we last got a chance to do some new Doctor Who, so fittingly, let's go back to the first Doctor. In a rarity, the story is set in what was the modern day. Seeing the TARDIS land in so appropriate a location, he needs to put an out-of-order sign on it to stop constables thinking it's the real deal. They get rather annoyed when that happens. Joining the Doctor is Dodo, Stephen having left the crew in the previous episode to stay with the Savages, although I don't know that those lengths are needed to try and get away from Dodo. They're both amazed at the recently completed post office tower.
Almost sexual, isn't it, Smithers?
Which gives the Doctor a funny sensation on his skin that reminds him of the Daleks, which, given that according to many reports no one was permitted to officially admit that a 627-foot-tall building in the middle of the city actually exists, it does sound like there might be some kind of perception filter thing going on there. The Doctor is able to get inside on the power of his hat, I guess, and look at the impressive new computer there and meet with Professor Brett and his secretary, Polly.
It's the only one in existence in the world. It's at least 10 years ahead of its time.
And it already has pornography on it. He boasts of its capabilities, and it's put to the test by first the Doctor and then Dodo. While the Doctor is interested in testing its basic mathematical abilities, she tests the claim of being all-knowing by asking what TARDIS means, and it actually gets it right. The computer, Votan, although spelled with a W because the scientists use a V sound in reference to the Norse god, and also because things sound much more amazing when they sound German. This thing is intended to be a centralized thinking machine, so either there's a record of it listening in on an explanation somewhere, or it's written down in a computer somewhere, which makes sense given what his future incarnations will get up to. The annoying thing about time travel, you get confounded by your own future slip-ups. At Dodo's request, Polly takes her to the Inferno Club for a good time. I previously talked about the complications with Jamie during Season 4, how in some of the early stories with him in it, there was a need to deal with having a character that the story hadn't planned on existing, and you'd wind up with two characters doing something together and splitting the action between them. Something similar first happened here. As I said, Stephen had just left, and the intention was for Ben the Sailor to take his place as the male companion to Dodo's female companion. However, Dodo wasn't working out for the show, and the decision was made not to renew her contract, but instead introduce new character Polly as the female companion. But there are things Dodo needs to do, so the pair will be going around together. Polly to begin building a rapport with Ben, and Dodo to do things related to the plot. So Polly goes over to try and cheer him up, since his sourpuss look risks infecting others, which isn't the kind of infection you expect from a man who just put ashore. Seems that he's been assigned to shore duty while his ship is off to the West Indies, and so that's got him depressed. Though he does jump to Polly's rescue when a guy tries to be a bit forceful with her. Trust me, do not piss off a Navy man. I accidentally slipped up one time and referred to them as soldiers, and I swear I was going to be hunted down and drowned for it. Meanwhile, the Doctor goes to the Royal Scientific Club, where Sir Charles explains to the reporters that in 4 days, all these big-ass computers will come under Votan's control, to the concern of the reporter from New York.
It seems to me, by the way you're talking, sir, that this machine can think for itself like a human being.
It can. Only much more accurately.
But, sir, I mean, is this kind of risky?
That is the least plausible New Yorker I have ever seen. 10 minutes in the Big Apple and he'll be beaten up and left naked in a dumpster. Brett's late for the conference. He calls in the major in charge of security to complain that there's some kind of problem. He's sure that somebody has been listening to him all day. Besides us, of course. Well, once the major leaves, Votan starts to hypnotize him, and soon he is the computer's slave. Seems the same sort of thing happened to Dodo. She's complaining about a headache and some high-pitched hum that's bothering her. Although this is the 60s, it could just be the music in the club. Well, whatever's going around, the major has it next because he walks in on Votan, gets taken over, and calls up the club to talk to Dodo, which finishes her brainwashing that way. Yep, even villainy is discovering the modern convenience of remote work. Well, Brett finally has shown up at the conference, but only to get a chance to grab Professor Krypton, an expert in computers as well.
Gentlemen, I'm sorry I was not able to attend. It was unavoidable.
My inferior human bowels demanded immediate evacuation. Now that he's allayed all possible suspicion, he can bring the other professor back to Votan.
Has the computer broken down?
On the contrary, it's we who have broken down.
You just pour your heart into your job and suddenly it's all about work and not about living anymore.
We've reached a standstill. We cannot develop the Earth any further. Further progress is impossible.
Kit Pedler provided the impetus for this story, the future co-creator of the Cybermen, so this is no surprise that it follows the same general idea. But rather than the Cybermen idea that the human parts of us must gradually go, Votan believes that even that is a waste. Maybe we'll be kept around if we're useful, but not many of us. Krypton naturally finds this ludicrous until he realizes the computer is indeed trying to take over his mind, and despite fighting hard to resist, he too eventually succumbs. And even as the Doctor arrives at the club for Dodo, she's arrived to join the others and find out her orders. This is not the sole time our hero will be referred to as Doctor Who by the villains. Of course, Doctor Who is the title of the show and not the name of the character, and it's been wondered how this was allowed to get through. There's been a few attempts to try to explain it. Most amusing is that the line you just heard is Doctor, who is required. To narrow it down, a bit, but alas, most of the cases it can only be a name. The theory I adhere to is that, as you saw, Votan is compelled to look up any information until it has an answer. Given that Votan likely found the information about the TARDIS and what it stands for from someone having written it down at some point in the past, it's probable that someone was referencing the Doctor and, wondering who he was, just simply wrote "who" next to it with a question mark. Except Votan mistook what it meant and assumed that "who" was the name of the individual. That, of course, is the best explanation. The most enjoyable explanation is that Votan had some kind of lookup error and some Chinese doctor by the name of Hu is being referenced.